Mob Psycho 100 is a kind of anime that only happens once the planets align, because Studio Bones was not only able to get the best animators in the industry, but they also gave them an incredible healthy schedule. However, I am here to de-align the planets. Instead of good animators, I will try to re-animate 2 secrets from Mob Psycho in a schedule of merely 7 days. But unlike my last video, I actually have a plan now. I'll give myself a deadline of 2.5 days to finish the first animation, and I'll leave the rest of the days to finish the second one. So, shall we start? This sequence right here is from Season 2, Episode 12, and at first glance, it looks quite simple. But I can guarantee you, this shot is way more complicated than you think. So let's divide it in layers. So all the way in the bottom, we have an animated background, then a black gradient, the character, in this case Torichiro, then another black gradient on top of the character, and for last but not least, a low opacity black smoke on top of everything. So after making a quick storyboard for this scene, I used some guidelines to help me define the staging of the scene and the position of the features of the characters, just to make sure I'm not going to draw something completely different from the original. After finishing the roof for this drawing, I immediately started adding shadows because this drawing is a still frame, so it will not move at all. But on the other hand, we have a fully animated background. This scene lasts 1 second and the background moves until the end of it. So I made 8 individual drawings of the smoke moving and spaced them on 3s, because if you do the math, 8 times 3 is 24, and I'm animating at 24 frames per second, which means the smoke animation perfectly lasts 1 second, which is the duration of the scene. So after cleaning up and adding shadows to the background, I made the black gradient in between the background and the character, alongside with the low opacity smoke. Then I move on to the more complex scene, and when I say complex, I mean it. Because just for 4 seconds of animation, I use a grand total of 14 layers. So, let me walk through my process. I started at layer 6, which was another still frame for Torichiro that seems like he just shat his pen. After cleaning up this rough drawing that I made, I moved on and started working layer 8 and 9, which are Mob's hair and Mob's body respectively. For his hair, I made a 5-frame loop. That's basically it. I don't know how to explain any further. Mob's body was also pretty straightforward. With the help of guidelines again, I just drew his features where they were supposed to be, and I also drew the black shadow for his eyes and nose. Now we go all the way back to layer 4 to add the speed lines in both of the characters. Okay. For Torichiro, I made a template for these lines and erased them according to where I wanted them to be. And then I shifted and made them shorter to make them move without having to redo the entire process again. For Mob's lines, I just drew some wide strokes going upwards and then I blurred them. Now everything looks pretty simple, but here's the actual challenging part. You can see in the original footage that Mob's skin is actually fully animated, and to replicate this effect is actually quite fun. I had to use a completely different software because I couldn't achieve this effect on Adobe Animate. Yes! I use Adobe Animate. You guys can stop asking me now. So on Paint to Side, I drew 3 samples, templates, whatever. And then I screenshotted the 3 of them and cookie cutted them to fit Mob's head.
Nice.
But it was right here when I decided to stop for now and continue tomorrow, because not only I was tired, but I was also looking like a total mess. On day 2, I turned on speedrun mode and right away started working at layer 14, aka the second animated background. This one was like a vortex made out of smoke, and to animate, it was actually pretty simple. First of all, I laid out the center of the vortex where all the smoke was being sucked. And to give this effect of the smoke being sucked, I just traced the smoke outline a couple of times and added a few bumps following the direction of the smoke to really sell the movement. Then I ended up coloring and adding this blur ball with low opacity on layer 13 to give the scene more depth. Now on layer 12, I made another looped animation, but this time it was for the smoked effect that you can't barely see in the original footage. Now all the way to the top in layer 3, I started animating Mob opening his eyes. And it was quite simple. It was just literally like 7 frames. We also have 2 impact frames, which both have 2 layers. The drawings, which I used my previous Torichiro drawing as a base, and the glow effect. And after I was finished with impact frames, I cleaned, added shadows, and started coloring Mob's hair. But I will leave most of the coloring for the next day because I was feeling quite EP. So it's day 2.5, which means I have only half the day to finish animation. But do not be afraid, my child. There's only a few things left to do. For example, I added a fading plain white color to the transition from the impact frames to the sequence, the blur effect on both backgrounds and on the shadows on Richiro's face, another smoke effect that was also blurred, camera movement, and 2 text in the end of the animation. And yeah, let's see the results. Okay, that was pretty good. But now I only have 4.5 days to finish the second sequence. So I need to lock the fuck in. But before I show you the sequence, let me just... Yeah, there we go. If you're asking yourself, why did I delete a portion of the sequence I'm about to animate, it is definitely not because I spent the second half of the day 2 and the first half of day 3 doing absolutely nothing. This sequence is from season 1, episode 8, and I chose this one specifically because I really like this shot that you guys just saw. As always, I started out with a very rough drawing for all the cuts. And I don't know what happened to me this day, but I just straight up drew this guy. I forgot his name, hold on. Oh, it's Koyama, okay. I straight up just drew Koyama without having to do any guidelines or anything. The reference picture was enough for me, I guess. After finishing the boards, I started working on the first cut because it was quite interesting. You see, Koyama is visibly shaking for his life here, and to make this type of motion is actually very simple. First, you animate a linear motion. In my case, Koyama is gripping Mob's arm. Then, I would immediately color it because we're going to be repeating some frames. In this 5-frame animation, we're going to copy the first 2 frames and paste them right between the transition from the second to the third. Then copy the second and third frame and paste them between the third and fourth frame, and so on, so on. It is basically going 1 frame forward, 1 frame back, and then 1 frame forward again. And I repeated this process in Koyama's hands, body, and head. For the second cut, what was that? What? What the fuck was that? Did you guys see that? What was that? Anyways, for the second cut, I used the almighty guidelines to help me out again. The funny thing about this shot is that this drawing is just a still frame that gets dragged up the screen. However, after finishing the 2 smear frames that come after the still frame, day 3 was over, and I was going to start the third cut in day 4. If you guys don't have the attention of the average TikTok user, you guys remember that I said that I wanted to re-animate this sequence because of this shot right here. And even though I actually had a pretty good time animating it, this shit took so long to make, it's not even... Probably because there were a lot of elements moving all at once with a lot of tiny details on screen. But without a doubt, my favorite part was the smears. I don't know, they just conveyed the right amount of speed really fast with some really interesting drawings. And on the last cut, I also used the guy. What the fuck? Again? What was that thing? What was that? In day 5, I would finish the last shot that was working in the previous day and would start adding shadows to all frames, which was probably the most boring part of it all. And after I finished adding shadows, fucking finally, I started the coloring process. So let me tell you something, I got bored really quick. So I left the rest of the coloring process for the next day because I was going to sleep. Bye!
The next day.
Day 6 was marked by me stress because I forgot that for this animation, I had an extra step in the coloring process. You see, in the first 2 cuts, the shadows on Koyama's and Mob's skins are a bit blurred. That's because the shadows were composited like that in the original cut. And instead of doing what I did in the first sequence that I animated, I just selected all the shadows on their skin and added a blur effect onto it. Then I would have to color it again, or else it would look a little bit weird if I didn't. Then repeated this whole process in every shadow that was on the skin. Moving on, I started working on the background, and for my luck, 3 out of the 5 backgrounds were just gradients with concrete textures applied on top. The other 2 left were quite literally polar opposites in how I felt while making them. The first one were the speed lines that I was able to figure out how to make it myself, and in the end, I was pretty satisfied with the results. The second one was from the second cut, and I basically traced the whole thing to make it as close as the original as possible. So the only thing that I did by myself was the coloring, and even that wasn't good enough. It looks a bit off from the original. Not only that, but coloring this piece took so long, I would only finish it in day... Yeah, as I was saying, I finished the background and began adding the finishing touches like the camera movement. And for the most part, it was quite chill. I also added some smoke effects on the second cut that I forgot to add, and that was basically it. Well, without further ado, here is the final animation. Yup, that's it. If you guys enjoyed this video, please do not forget to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I see you later.